Welcome back to the Bytes podcast. For those that potentially are new here or haven't listened before, this is a regular podcast that Bytes put on, and essentially we sit with peers in the industry to give insight into hot topics and business challenges that we're currently seeing. And today we've got a great podcast. I'm joined by Stuart Wilson from Forcepoint, and my name is Jake Ross, and I work at Bytes. I head up the network security sales team here. So, Stuart, do you want to introduce yourself? I know I've just given you a 5-second intro, but I'll allow you to speak as well.
No problem, Jake. Thanks very much for having us here, by the way. I appreciate the opportunity to come and have a chat today. So, yeah, look, Stuart Wilson. I am Senior Manager for Sales Engineering at Forcepoint, so I head up the sales engineering function for Northern Europe. I've spent about 10 years at Forcepoint, so through various iterations of the company and what it's been doing. Still thoroughly enjoying it, so great.
Amazing. A couple of name changes in that term, then, no doubt.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. So today, I guess we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that we see within modern network security, and ultimately about how businesses have evolved and how security also needs to evolve with those businesses. When we talk about, I guess, the changing IT landscape at the moment, we're seeing quite a lot of it, and a lot of it's being driven around hybrid working, cloud adoption. Stuart, do you think you could just, I guess, go on a little bit more about some of those changes and potentially some of those impacts that businesses are currently seeing as a result of both hybrid working and cloud and SaaS adoption?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on some of the key high-level points there, and that we don't mention the C word anymore, right? But COVID obviously was an accelerant for a lot of those things for a lot of organizations. And whilst very difficult at the time, I think we can all see the productivity gains and so on that have been delivered as a result of changes to how people work. And it was an interesting conversation I had the other day where somebody kind of, again, setting the scene for why the problem keeps growing for everybody. And the conversation was around, nobody today will ever have less data than they have today, right? So for all of us, the amount of data, the volume of data is just constantly growing all of the time. And that's true in the business world as well, right? So that's kind of driving a number of the problems. That data has got to be protected, but it's also got to be utilized by a workforce, and that workforce in many different places. We know from our research that about, I think, 75% of workers are now either working full-time remote or part-time remote. And that's opened up a whole host of challenges in terms of how they can access that data, how they can work with it, but how organizations can also keep it secure. Yeah,
and well, we're both sat at home right now, aren't we? So
absolutely, yeah.
I think that's a great example of how potentially we may have come from having an organization that has a hub and spoke network, and we were in the office, we were behind the firewall, we were in that border. Great, crack on and do your job, access data, no one minds. And I won't say the word, but the dreaded C word kind of caused a little bit of change there, and some businesses were able to react extremely quickly, and we're agile and we're set up for that. But actually, there was a lot of I'm going to use the phrase hodge jobs. I don't even know if that's a phrase that people use, but actually people just kind of put plasters on their business and went, work from home, we've got to a place where you can now do your job. But actually security has been a massive afterthought within that process. And I really think kind of this year, certainly, and I guess towards the end of last year, a lot of the conversations that we're having with businesses are around, okay, you've committed to hybrid working. How do we set up an infrastructure which actually matches your approach to current working? I guess, could you expand a little bit more on that? And I guess the conversations you're having, I'm assuming you're seeing a very similar thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, we collectively, right, as two organizations, worked together, through that period to help a lot of organizations out there, right, to make that shift. We also saw the same as you, right? A lot of people did more of what they'd always done, right? So they've always had a VPN solution. So they just extended that capability, right? They threw it open to all users.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's just what every organization wants, 100%. So yeah, a lot of people took that approach at the time of COVID, and I think now a lot of people are kind of ready to revisit. And the words that you just used, I think, is great. To look at that architecture, the infrastructure, their approach, and to actually make it work for what their business needs are now. And it's not that it's no longer this kind of short-term approach to working. It is the norm for people. So, their approach to providing access and securing access has got to change accordingly, and grow in the right direction. And that's why we're seeing, technologies like, SASE, SSE, that we're obviously going to talk about a little bit in this conversation. We're seeing that the prevalence, right, the real need for it, the real need for people to go from that traditional approach, which was very much on-prem centric, whether they had doors open to allow people back in to access what they needed to, but it was all driven from an on-prem perspective. And this move to SASE is about moving that connectivity and that security piece up to a cloud-delivered infrastructure, right? So something which is much more flexible, has many more routes to apply better security, and ultimately it's now closer to where the user sits, and where the data and the applications the user interacts with are also sitting.
Yeah, and it's exactly that, isn't it? And our CTO, Dave Raw, I'm sure if you've listened to the podcast before, you've no doubt heard him speak before. He always talks about this approach to IT, which is he calls the meh approach. And it's this idea that as a CTO, when a request comes in, whether that's I want to work from home, I want to work from a coffee shop, I want to access this data, but I won't be in the office, what that needs to look like. He wants to have a network and an architecture set up where he goes, nah, I don't care. Yeah, go ahead and do it. We've built an organization and an IT infrastructure that's fit for that. And I think this change that we've seen in the last couple of years has really started to bring that conversation on. And some businesses are unhappy, and they've got CTOs going, I don't care where you work, I don't care what you're trying to access, like, we've got it. And actually for other businesses, that's a real challenge at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's that realization that business moves on super quick, right? It can't be held back, because individuals within the business will find a way to do the things that they need to do. So if you can get this security posture, this architecture in place ahead of time, right, a way of dealing with what the future is going to hold. And look, we all know that the future for everything is in the cloud, certainly for the moment anyway, right? So if we can put in this security framework and architecture that deals with the various needs that we know people have now and are going to have moving forwards, it just makes a whole lot of sense, because of, imagine those productivity increases, right, by that meh response that you're talking about. People don't need to worry in the same way. They've not got the same challenges or delays in being able to move the business forwards.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of phrases earlier, which I'm sure people listening would have heard of, but it was SSE and then SASE, so SASE. I feel the market's getting a little bit convoluted, and we're starting to hear more of these acronyms, and more businesses are kind of chucking these buzzwords out. Probably zero trust network access is probably another one that we hear a lot. Do you think it might be worth talking for a couple of minutes about what specifically that is? So if someone's listening to this and keeps going, well, you know what, I keep hearing SSE or SASE, but I don't really get what it is. Do you think you could just, I guess, give me a 20-second pitch on the differences and what they look like?
Yeah, so look, SSE, Secure Service Edge. Even I get confused with that. Right? So Secure Service Edge for SSE, and then SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. And they are, to all intensive purposes, right, we are talking about the same thing almost. Okay, one is focused on really the security elements, right? So that movement of traditional security elements to a cloud-based service. And then the other one, the SASE element, is also concerned with, how does the traffic get to that cloud-based service, right? Or how do we make intelligent decisions about how a user ultimately should be accessing those applications and data that they need to in the most efficient, user experience friendly way, and ultimately cost-effective way for businesses to operate.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. And I guess I see kind of the SSE side very user-centric as well. And obviously they've all terms coined by Gartner, but Gartner have actually now got rid of their Secure Web Gateway and their CASB Magic Quadrants in place of SSE. And that's kind of where we're seeing this. Actually, it's one conversation. It's about, let's secure this user. And I guess it kind of comes back to that meh analogy of, well, it doesn't really matter what the network looks like because the user's secure. And wherever they're trying we're comfortable.
SSE and SASE, right, are all to do with convergence. So, Gartner following suit, right, reducing the number of quadrants that they've got, converging them down onto those vendors that can deliver ultimately that consolidated, converged solution.
Yeah, I'd never paired those two together, but the Magic Quadrants are also being consolidated. I guess if we could talk about Forcepoint, and I'd be really keen to hear how Forcepoint specifically are working with customers to overcome some of these challenges. And I'm going to add a second question to that question as well. I guess we've also Forcepoint have been around for a long while. You've mentioned you've been there for 10 years or so. No doubt many people listening have probably experienced or worked with Forcepoint, so it might be worth giving a bit of an update of some of the changes that have been going on at Forcepoint and what Forcepoint looks like in 2023.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm quite binary, so you've asked me two questions. I can only remember the second one that you've asked, so you might have to re-point me on the first one as we get there. So, but yeah, look, the quick, 90-second view of Forcepoint and where we've come from. So I think about 2016, early part of 2016 is when Forcepoint came about. And people, I'm sure there's loads of people familiar with Forcepoint. For those who aren't, Forcepoint came from, names that I'm sure you will be very familiar with. So ultimately, WebSense was a big part of what then turned into Forcepoint. And WebSense were, one of the first in terms of, business web filtering solutions, right? Ways that businesses could secure internet access for their employees from way back in the mid-90s, right the way through to that 2015, 2016 timeframe. WebSense were acquired at that point by Raytheon, so by a defense contractor. And at the same time, a number of other acquisitions were made. So Stonesoft, which is where we get the A part, so that connectivity part of our SASE solution, our firewalling capability, along with some kind of analytics and CASB acquisitions as well. And then sort of fast forward 5 years, and then Forcepoint itself, were acquired by VC, so by Francisco Partners. Francisco Partners, one of those VCs, well known actually for their investment into technology companies, right, and trying to drive them forwards, and not trying to, break them up like can be seen with some others. So they set their stall out very quickly with a series of acquisitions that were made to kind of bolster what WebSense into Forcepoint had been doing for a number of years, but to push us in this direction, which ultimately is now being referred to as SASE or SSE. And those acquisitions were to give us our own native capability for something called RBI, so remote browser isolation. We acquired a UK-based company called Deep Secure, who have given us something really cool called CDR, so content disarm and reconstruction. So I'll give the acronyms and the extensions of them. People can go and Google if they're unfamiliar with some of these terms. But really interesting technology, right? And really layers into this kind of zero trust conversation and kind of, interesting ways to apply zero trust to problems that you might not be thinking about applying zero trust to. And then most recently, the last acquisition was an organization called BitGlass, who were a leader in that CASB marketplace. Forcepoint acquiring them. What we got from BitGlass, right, was essentially a platform that we can build the future of Forcepoint on. So, a SASE architecture built on AWS, really important for us. We don't want to be a data center company. There are people who are very good at doing that, such as AWS. So we're natively built on AWS as a platform. And we now have this SSE SASE solution that we're taking to market.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate it. And I think that last point is really key. And I know there's been a handful of changes throughout the years, but this acquisition of BitGlass, I guess, has given Forcepoint a whole new look, but also a way that the tool's delivered. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I say, built on AWS, which is massively important. The scalability that we get, right? The ability to deal with any customer of any size in any location, right? It's just easy because of being in that position where we're within AWS, and it's a modern platform, right? The other acquisitions that we've made, the speed at which we've been able to integrate those technologies into what is now Forcepoint One, our SASE solution, is incredible. Right, because it's all streamlined. It's all been built with the idea of being able to add new functionality into it. So it's a real exciting time for us at Forcepoint because we are moving at such speed with adding new things into that solution. Consolidating into that single Forcepoint One platform.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I wanted to highlight it specifically. I think we see a lot of acquisitions in our industry generally, but it tends to be, hey, we've got a technology, we've just bought someone, now you've got an extra little add-on, and here's an extra license you can procure from us. But actually, what Forcepoint have done is they've gone, our whole technology stack now has a backbone of which any new technologies can now sit across, and we can deploy out, and it's nice and slick and it's nice and smooth. So yeah, really positive. So the first part of my
Yeah, and actually, WebSense. Sorry, I was just going to add,
yeah.
Jake. Sorry, that WebSense, also had a bit of a proven history of doing that, right? By bringing web, email, and data security together. So again, it's something we're at our core we're familiar with, right? With that need to bring things together properly. And I guess the bit that I didn't touch on at the end of that was just around the data solution, which again, people who know Forcepoint will know that we're very well established and well known for the capability in our DLP solution. That is just another element of the Forcepoint One platform. Okay, so that is being integrated so that we can apply the same type of DLP controls that people are familiar with at the endpoint level, at the discovery network level, right? But into web applications, to cloud applications, and private applications as well, all through single policy construct, which is a massive win for people, right? To know they've got consistency, because that portrays from a security admin's perspective, they want to know that they can write one policy and apply it to all these different channels. But from, we were touching on that end user experience part earlier in the conversation. It also means that the end user, they get presented with the same response, whatever they're trying to do over whatever channel they're trying to achieve it. So again, it's really important for us that that's come together. And we've mentioned SASE and SSE. We very much view ourselves as data first SASE, right? That's the approach that we're taking, because we view it as such an important part of that overall SASE SSE approach.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting way of, I guess, coming to the conversation, or bringing a vendor to a table from Forcepoint's point of view. That we see a handful of vendors that potentially claim that they've got an SSE message and about securing the user, but DLP is really at the heart of your technology, isn't it? And I think that's, whilst we see DLP elsewhere, it tends to be, hey, we've got this box. do you want to tick this box, and we'll do some extra DLP capabilities. So back to my earlier question. I guess the question was, it'd be great to understand how you specifically are working with clients, and how Forcepoint are overcoming some of those challenges that we mentioned earlier around hybrid working, and cloud and SaaS adoption. And obviously, from where the conversation is going, we can see that it's kind of that SSE SASE play, but it'd be good to hear from yourself about some specific use cases of how you're working with clients to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, and I guess demystifying a little bit is kind of the first step, because at its heart, SASE SSE, it's not anything drastically different for people to get their heads around, right? It is about technologies that they understand already, but it's about the movement of those technologies, as I said earlier, to get them closer to where the users now are, and closer to where the data and the applications are that the users are interacting with. So our approach is a modular one, right? You don't have to come and say, right, Forcepoint One, we've got to do it all today. We'd love you to, right? But there is an approach that can be taken. You can pick off the most important things to you first, right? Maybe you need to find a way to secure access to legacy private applications that you've got. Well, zero trust network access is a perfect way to go about that, right? It's a perfect approach. It's a perfect way to start on that SASE journey. Yeah, maybe there are cloud applications that people need to secure. Again, through that COVID time and beyond, the ramp up of people taking those cloud services is massive. Are they getting the ROI on them that they expected to get, right? Can they actually utilize all of those cloud applications, or are they too concerned that actually we've got a data risk, right? If we open this up, we don't have the controls that we need to ensure that our data is safe and our users are interacting with it in the way that we want to. And again, SASE SSE, right, it can give them the ability to get that full return on investment for what they need to, right? They can actually realize that value in those cloud applications. They can get the productivity gains from it. Everything they thought they were going to get day one, they can finally realize.
Yeah. And
then
don't have to worry about the data behind it as well. So here's all your access, nice and secure, but actually do whatever you need to do with the data, and we'll make sure.
Indeed, right, and that again, I've mentioned those zero trust network access to the private applications, right? You still need to protect the data in those private applications, right? Why would it be any different to a cloud application? It's maybe even more important, right? That's the Probably the starting point for where lots of customers' data originates could be in some of those, legacy, traditional, or on-premise applications that users need to have access to. So again, you want to make sure that you're monitoring, this zero trust approach, right? That you're understanding who's coming in, who's requesting what, and then where they're going to take that data and if they're going to use it in the way that you want them to.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. Well, I have a feeling we're running out of time. So, unless there's anything to add, I think potentially best to draw a line under this. Obviously, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, you know what, we are trying to address challenges around cloud adoption, SaaS adoption, hybrid working, or potentially the data within your environment. There's, I guess, a couple of options that we can go through. One is that we will be hosting a webinar. So wherever you're listening to this, there should be a link below, or hopefully there'll be a link below to the webinar. But also you can reach out to your Bytes account manager, and we can make sure that we set up a call with Forcepoint or with one of the Bytes pre-sales guys to talk about the challenges you're facing and how potentially we can look at overcoming those. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Stuart.
Great, thanks very much, Jake. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Have a good day. Done.